I personally almost broke the business like 4 or 5 times with how fast we were growing. We went from 8 people to 30 people in about 30 days.
Whether you're venture-backed or not, in this era, a lot of SaaS companies need to start acting more like normal businesses, where P&L is important, efficiency is important, funding is harder than ever. SaaS founders can learn a ton from services founders.
We also spent a lot of time giving free help to people in the community, because that's what the community is about. It's not about what I can get out of it. It's about making sure that we're all getting something out of it, right? By giving. I love solving problems. Whether it leads to them buying from me or not, doesn't matter. Like, that was never the goal. The goal was just to create this word of mouth referral machine that exists out in the ether. So from the very beginning, Seamus and I had a plan. We wanted to exit within 5 years. We did it in 3.5 from when I joined. So pretty awesome.
Behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened. How much time are your sales reps wasting on manual tasks at the end of every sales call? How confident are you that your team has full visibility into the pipeline? Are you sure no deals are slipping through the cracks? Staying on top of every opportunity is tough, and that's why we're thrilled to partner with Attention. Attention's AI-powered call recording platform ensures that your deals are executed flawlessly, records your calls, generates next step summaries, action items, and even creates scorecards for every single call, so your reps can continuously improve. But that's really just the beginning. Attention's generalized insights allow you to ask any question across all of your conversations. Think of it like ChatGPT for your sales calls. And the magic doesn't stop there. Attention also lets you build automated workflows tailored to your needs. For example, if a customer mentions they're at risk of churning during a call, Attention can automatically loop in a sales director or a solutions engineer to ensure that customer receives the full white glove treatment, reducing churn, keeping your business thriving. Attention is helping companies onboard reps faster, increase the productivity of their existing teams, and giving revenue leaders unparalleled visibility into their pipelines, all while automating those tedious, dreaded manual tasks. If any of those challenges sound familiar, I highly recommend checking them out at attention.tech.
Hello. Welcome back to the GTM pod. I'm excited to be here, fresh off a nice San Diego retreat that we just did. Was very sad that our guest here today couldn't make it, but we had a good time down in San Diego. And I am joined by my friend Cliff Simon. Cliff, what's up, man?
How's it going, Scott? Yeah, sorry I couldn't be there. It's hard to get away for work stuff on the weekends, especially when you've got 3 little kids.
Totally. I totally get it. Yeah, it's one of those things we kind of, left it up to the group and our LPs to decide, is it better on the week, but then you have to miss work, or is it better on the weekends and then you miss family? And I guess people are more willing to miss family time from time to time. So
have you ever read the book, The One Thing?
I don't think I have.
So the author talks about you're juggling all these balls all the time, right? And some of them are things that'll bounce back, and some of them are made of glass. And in my opinion, at least, family's glass. And like, if I drop that, like, it's not something I can just put back together. But if it's work and I miss a day or 2 or 3 of something, I can typically get back into it because it's going to bounce back up and we'll catch it, right? But that's sort of my thought process around it.
Truth. And in fairness to our LPs, I think many of them planned it out super far in advance. And we did have some folks have to bail because life does happen. Kids get sick, but we had a blast. It was a lot of fun, and we'll get you out at the next one. But super excited. I mean, we were catching up at our operator happy hour down at SaaSter, and you've just got so much happening right now in your life. You went through an acquisition this year. You spoke at Inbound on 2 different panels, actually, which is a huge testament to kind of the knowledge base and just what you've done. And I was like, hey, I think why don't we just like catch up on the podcast? I think there's a lot of lessons that you probably learned. So quickly, I want to go through your bio just for our listeners. So Cliff is the CRO of Carabiner Group, a part of SBI Growth. He's also an advisor and a fractional executive for several high growth startups. And really, it's all about utilizing his expertise in all things go to market and RevOps, and super, super active in multiple go to market communities. We appreciate you being part of the fund. I know you're big in Pavilion and do a lot to give back to the kind of broader go to market community. But yeah, you've been doing this almost 2 decades, pretty broad tech experience, has anchored go to market teams in both SaaS and the service industry, which I think is really unique. And you've won some rewards, 2024 Modern Sales Leader Award from HubSpot, which is super cool. 2024 Top 50 CROs to Watch by Pavilion. Pretty cool stuff, man. And I think one of the other reasons I wanted to bring you on, other than there's so much going on in your life, is I feel like right now, whether you're venture backed or not, in this era, I feel like a lot of SaaS companies need to start acting more like, we'll call them normal businesses, where, P&L is, yeah, exactly. Where P&L is important, efficiency is important, funding is harder than ever. And I think many folks need to get, to that default alive. And I think, SaaS founders can learn a ton from services founders and leaders like yourself. Are you seeing that with a lot of the founders that you're working with, where things that maybe didn't used to matter are starting to matter a lot more?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's talking about like profitable and efficient growth. You're hearing words in the SaaS space that typically didn't exist, like EBITDA, right? So it's not just growth anymore. And I know we all know this, right? At least folks that are going to be listening to this podcast know this. But yeah, we have to run our businesses like actual businesses that have to generate income, right? Or at least operate as close to not a loss as possible.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And that is a huge, huge shift. And it's been happening over the last, 3-4 years. And I think will continue. I don't think we're going back. There will always be certain types of businesses, and particularly in kind of the AI realm right now, that, the growth is so insane that you don't worry quite as much. But I don't think we're ever going back. And efficiency is going to be the name of the game for quite some time now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think what the future actually looks like is more micro businesses, people going after a very specific niche, where the total TAM is like maybe 5,000, 10,000 people, and really hitting them and servicing them well with a product that meets a very specific need. Maybe the overall ARR of that business doesn't have to go anywhere north of like 1 to 5 million, but that's where it stops. It doesn't, it's something that grows. And then it's a team of like 5 people using AI to do the development. And that's it. And you build like 5 to 10 of those things. And now you've got a really interesting portfolio.
Totally. Yeah. I think, we're spending as a fund a ton of time in kind of the cross section of vertical SaaS and AI right now. And, you just don't need as many employees as you needed before, which is interesting. And, we had Dennis Leandris, the CRO of Procore, on, the other week, and talk a little bit about, Price's Law, which is a super interesting episode if listeners haven't checked it out. But yeah, I think we're actually going to see even really big businesses, maybe be built by 50 people. Can you build a multi-billion-dollar company with 50 people? You could make the argument with, agentic AI that can be possible in the not so distant future.
I'm game to check it out.
Yeah, let's see where it goes. But man, so when I look at your career, there's sort of this red thread, which of course I appreciate because it's a similar thread in my own personal career. And the thread is driving growth through community. And you really managed to do this from the very inception of your business, which I get you to talk about, which I think is really cool, all the way up to a successful acquisition. How important is community to you? It feels like we'll call you an early adopter of community. Why did you spend so much time and resources in these communities that were popping up?
Well, I think first of all, it goes back to just like human psychology and the way that we operate as people. We're meant and created to exist in community with one another, right? So, if you start from that baseline of understanding, then you go out, okay, well, how do people typically go about in their day-to-day lives purchasing or making decisions? We don't do it in a silo. We don't do it in a bubble. If I'm going to make any big decision in my life, I typically consult the people that I trust in my immediate circle, right? Well, people in B2B do the exact same thing, right? We do that in online communities. We do that in Slack channels. We do that at dinner, right? When we're spending time with one another. So in my previous life before Carabiner, I would try to find those places, right? The conferences, the bars around the conference if my company wouldn't pay for me to have a pass, right? And try to be really creative. And you go on LinkedIn, you find the profile picture, like, all right, is that the right person? Okay. But going about it that way, and post COVID, all of that transferred to the online space because we were all shut up in our houses, and that was sort of like the inception of it. But how do you drive that consumer behavior within the B2B space?
Yeah. Such an interesting trend and one we've had our finger on for a while now. I know you're an advisor at Noble that's really focused on kind of this same idea that people buy through social proof of their peers, people they know, like and trust.
That's right.
And I'm with you that COVID did feel like kind of the tipping point where people fully adopted digital communities. Before that, it was like, I don't know. I'm on enough Zooms. I don't need to like join this big group Zoom, or, I'm in enough Slack channels. I don't need to add another one. But people were looking to kind of fill this gap that they weren't getting elsewhere. And now it's just become a learned behavior. And again, I think one that's here to stay.
That's funny. Like, I met Rahul a year ago, and when we had our first conversation, and he heard about how we did go to market within Carabiner, say, "Oh my gosh, we have to like actually sit down and talk." So really excited about that product.
Yeah. Well, let's talk through it. What have been, I guess, and before we get into kind of the whole growth trajectory of Carabiner and how you pulled that off, I think it goes even before that. You actually met your co-founder through community. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I got laid off at the end of September of 20 and was networking like a banshee. Trying to find a new role. Had, gosh, how old was he at the time? Maybe like 9 months old, something like that. And we had just got a new house, and I'm like, man, got to find something else. Let's figure this out. And I'd been interviewing for head of sales roles at VP, or VP roles at Seed and Series A. And one of the folks I networked with turned me on to a community called RevGenius, which I'm sure most of you guys have heard of. And the first day I was on RevGenius, some young guy was looking for some help in sales. So reached out, and lo and behold, that's Seamus. And within a couple of weeks, I think, I had an offer, and my wife's like, "You can't turn this down." It was originally for a part-time VP role. He had a small stable of 10 part-time SDRs who were all kids that were still in college. That he was asking me to manage, and I was like, all right, I could do that, maybe, but I think this could be really interesting. And my wife has incredible sixth sense around like people, and she's always been right about like personalities, and she's like, you should do this. This feels right. So I did, and we didn't look back.
Hell yeah! And then dove right in. Maybe kind of set the table a little bit. What do you do at Carabiner Group? It's a services-based business, but maybe kind of set the table a little bit, and then we'll dive into the growth journey.
Sure. Yeah. So Carabiner does RevOps as a service, which means we help companies with the customer journey, the go-to-market processes that map to that journey, and then the capability of building up technology to meet those processes and that customer journey together. And we do it from lead to cash. So everything from your marketing automation platforms and ABM all the way through to CRM and ERP. So we'll do your NetSuite, your Salesforce, your HubSpot, your Marketo, and everything in between.
Mhm. Incredibly needed right now. I think we actually need more service businesses, or maybe you guys just continue to grow. But it's definitely a need out there that we see. Um, my question is, I'm always curious when someone goes through an successful acquisition or a successful sale. Did you begin with the end in mind? Did you and Seamus, put your heads together and you're like, all right, we're going to run at this really hard for 3-4 years, and then here are the potential buyers? Like, did you map that all out?
So it's funny, right? When he and I first met, the idea was he wanted someone to come in and just do sales. And I was like, I don't want to do sales. I can sell, but I want to build something. I went from a 90,000 person company to 30,000 to 3,000 to 300 to 35 to 3. I was, employee 3 here. And to me, it was really important to have my hands be able to touch everything within a business and be able to sort of mold it. And we talked about that from the very beginning. So, over the course of those few weeks when we first met, that's how it transpired, right? It was like, oh, you needed a seller, but I actually want to do all these other things. Like, okay, well, we can build that into it. Most of my original interview process was actually building out the FP&A for year one and figuring out what metrics we needed to hit based off of the conversion data. And I think it was me asking those questions that let him know that I was thinking about this bigger role and not just being a frontline seller, right? But to your point, yeah, we wanted to put together a 5-year plan. When we built out our Salesforce instance from the very beginning, it was with the understanding that there were data points that we would need to be able to put together for a deal room that would be necessary in order to tell the growth story of the company. And yeah, we built all that pretty much from day one.
I love that. And you pulled it off. What are some of the lessons you've kind of learned along the way?
Oh God, I think I personally almost broke the business like 4 or 5 times with how fast we were growing. Different problems
Good
that
problem
I
to have.
faced in. No, it's a fun problem to have, but it's really difficult in the services business versus, mind you, also a bootstrap business versus doing it in SaaS where I've had successful stints before. Um, you have to hire more people to be able to do the work. And we couldn't keep up because my sales cycle was literally half the time it took us to put someone through an employment verification cycle to make sure they could actually do the job that we were hiring them for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super tough. So then you have to go, you're selling customers on one side, and then you got to go sell other people to go work for you on the other side. It's almost like a two-sided marketplace a little bit when you're running a services businesses that's growing that quickly.
Yeah, and I think one of the other mistakes we made early was over leveraging W-2 employees versus 1099s. We brought on a lot of folks from a staffing perspective. When I joined, again, number 3, after the first year, we were 8 people. That was December of 21. January of 22, we were 20 people. And I think February 1st, we were 30. We went from 8 people to 30 people in about 30 days.
Wow.
Bootstrapped. It was crazy.
How many of those hires did you get right? I feel like that's tough to hire
How
that
do you
many
define
people
get
at once.
right? Like, most of those people did the role and were in seat at least a year and a half, almost 2. So felt pretty good just knowing that like that's semi-typical turnover for our space, especially seeing the growth that revenue operations was going through during that same time period. People in RevOps used to stick around for 22 to 24 months before they'd go on to their next thing. And during that really big rise where it was the number 1 job on LinkedIn, I mean, I think it's still number 4 this year, right? The director of RevOps role. But people were leaving after like 10 months because they were getting crazy money thrown at them because the need was so incredible, right?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think we're seeing the rise of more folks using contractors. Again, it feels like it's almost like cyclical. But But do you advise like some of the startups that you work with to, maybe you don't hire a full team out in this particular function of go to market? Maybe you can get away with some contractors to begin with. Is that um, what's your view on full time versus contractor?
I don't think that you'll ever be served by a contractor as well as you will be by someone internally. The question becomes, can you find the right person with the right skill set at the right stage of their career at a price that you can afford for where you are as a business? If you're Series A, probably not. You're probably going to get someone that's a generalist, that's growing and has a desire to grow into a strategy role. And then you bring, a team like ours alongside, and we can help out with the hands and feet work. We can also be a little bit of air cover on the strategy side, because we've seen a bunch of things that person probably hasn't, given not where they typically are in their career. Later on, yeah, you probably end up replacing us with a decent sized internal team. But then the balance remains, how much of that becomes an internal team that can handle the day-to-day stuff of the systems that don't change a ton? And how much of that do you then outsource for the things that are niche or specialized, where you're only going to need that particular skill set for 6 months at a clip?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It all goes back to P&L, right?
Yeah, totally. So focus back on the growth side. So this GTM podcast, I'm sure all the founders, leaders listening to this are like, I want the problem that Cliff had, which is I have too many customers and I can't service them all. A lot of our listeners are going to be software businesses. But what were you doing to grow so quickly? Like, what did you get right?
I think we did a couple things. We got ahead of the RevOps agenda, right? When I first joined Carabiner, we were a Salesforce shop, and only Salesforce. I think it was my second customer that I sold here. We spent all the money from that customer paying a HubSpot agency to fix the problems that existed top of funnel, so that we could fix the downstream effects. That went terribly wrong, and I said never again. And then that happened right around the same time Jocko did the very first Winning by Design revenue growth architecture course with Pavilion. And I was part of that class. And when that happened, I was like, this is it. Like, no turning back. I'd already had these thoughts of we needed to be full service, not just Salesforce. And that was sort of like the other piece that was like, yes, absolutely, this is the way we're going to go. We filed for the trademark on RevOps as a service. And we went from doing 5 clients a quarter to 5 clients a month. ACV was 123, 124 in that first year. Average time to close 26 days.
That's wild. So you're riding this wave, you're on this trend. What were some of the kind of tactics that you used beyond, like, you're showing up in all these, communities? How are folks finding out about you? Was this largely inbound? Did you have a big outbound team?
We had one sales rep that joined us halfway through 21, who came from a partner of ours. He focused mostly on outbound, and we were testing messaging in that, very specifically in the financial services part of the market, where we were very strong in that partner play. I focused on the software side because that was my background and things that I knew. We did no marketing spend that first year. We spent no money on SEO or ads, and it was almost entirely reaching out to people through community. So adding value. Sam's really big on, kind people finish first, and you give to give, right? And eventually something comes back. So we did a lot of conversations, just grassroots, hand-to-hand combat. And, you said I've got that wide range of experience. So people would ask about things, and I would just comment in and offer up time to workshop those ideas. I'm happy to try to help people figure problems out. I love solving problems, and whether it leads to them buying from me or not doesn't matter. Like, that was never the goal, right? The goal was just to create this word of mouth referral machine that exists out in the ether, so that way, when inevitably somebody asks you or Sophie or anyone else on the GTM team, who should I be talking to if I need help with RevOps? You guys say, talk to Cliff, talk to Carabiner, right? And trying to make that happen at scale, to the point where we were doing booking 83 meetings a month. Well, me. then like the team as a whole, we were probably doing, between the two of us that first year, probably doing about 100 meetings, 120 meetings a month that we were booking.
Wow. Wow. All through community is
Yeah.
wow. And maybe I'll get you to break down again how you approached communities, because again, a lot of SaaS companies are listening to this, and I see a lot of times like, okay, we've identified this community where our buyer lives. We need to go make sure our partnership person is in there, and it's going to be a great, lead funnel for us. And then they go in, and when someone asks a question, they're basically like putting in their own URL and are like, "Hey, we solved for this," and of course,
Yeah,
that's
not the way.
not working.
Yeah.
Walk me through sort of like the long game, and put on your maybe SaaS company hat. If you were a software company leader, how would you interact with communities today and turn that into pipeline?
Yeah. Don't go and sell there. Just don't do it. Right. On the very, very rare instance that someone specifically calls out your technology that they are trying to understand better, you can say, "Hey, I work for that company. I'm happy to talk to you about it." I think that's really different than someone asking a question about compensation. And I work for QuotaPath, and now I'm going to go in and say, "Listen, I see this all the time. I'm happy to talk to you about it. Not going to sell you anything. Just happy to have a conversation." Right. I think that's a very different approach. And at the end, most of the time when I was talking to folks, I wouldn't even talk about RevOps. We just talk about the problem that they're working through, whether that was a comp plan, team design and structure, go to market segmentation, whatever it might be, right? A lot of it was on the strategy side. And then eventually, it's like, "What do you do?" Like, "Well, we do RevOps. And if you ever need help with that, great. But more importantly, if you ever know anyone that might need help with that, if you could remember our name, that would be awesome." And that led to this really cool flywheel. Um, Pavilion actually is the community that took the longest level of engagement to get that flywheel going, but it was the one that was also the most profitable. We're we're the case study on Pavilion's website, which is great. And we owe a lot of success to the work that we did there, but we also spent a lot of time just giving free help to people in the community, because that's what community is about. It's not about what I can get out of it. It's about making sure that we're all getting something out of it, right? By giving.
Totally. Totally. Do you have, and of course, like you have to have that mentality that you described. Like you're not going into this with, I'm going to get something eventually mentality. But, again, let's say I'm a software leader or founder. We've maybe invested a lot in this community financially and my time. Um, is there like a time horizon of value to revenue that you identified? Because it sounds like, you said Pavilion took a little bit longer. If you Rev Genius was quicker. GTM community was different. What were those time horizons of just like give before it started coming back?
Yeah. I want to say Rev Genius was 3 months, WizOps 3 months, RevOps Co-op 5 months, Pavilion 8 months.
I love that. I love that. Just rattle them all off. That's I think that's really interesting. And I don't know if I've ever heard anyone talk about that, of like, the length of community ROI. And I'm a
But
huge
the
believer of
RO,
that.
when
Yeah.
you talk about like the Pavilion thing, right? We got a huge amount of ROI out of that. But I was also the number one active person on Pavilion Slack that wasn't a Pavilion employee month over month by anywhere from 3 to 6x the number of activities I was doing in that Slack for almost the entirety of 2021. So if like number two was doing 220 actions, I was doing anywhere from 600 to 1200, right? It was, it goes back to the psychology of it, right? Because people in our world today, not only do they look to these communities for help, and by interacting with those communities, are you providing value not just for a personal brand or a corporate brand, but you're providing value to the community because the people that are going to the community are actually getting something out of it. But then by meeting them immediately when they ask the question and showing up in the right moment, you're feeding the instant gratification monster that sort of lives in most of us Westerners, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I love that. Yeah. As soon as I ask a question, I'm asking it because I need the answer like right now, not in three days from now.
right. So like our trick was always, and I know everyone probably knows about this now, but within Slack, you can set keyword notifications. So, I'm doing my 40 to 60 Zooms a week. And while that's up, I've got Slack up on the other computer and I'm like, okay, hey, yeah, I could talk to you about that. Here's my link. Book some time.
Yeah.
Super
Yeah.
uninvasive, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I imagine there's, a lot of leaders listening to this and they're like, wow, that sounds like so much work and so much time. But then you
It
think
is.
of what it translates into. It's like, hey, to drive 100 and I think it was 30 meetings a month, what? You need to build out a 10, 12 person SDR team, spend time hiring them, spend time training them, and then it might not even work. Think of the amount of time that's going to go into that
Time,
versus,
capital,
yeah,
right?
totally.
We got rid of the SDR team like within 3 or 4 months of me being here, except for 2. It is impossible to train people virtually, especially when you're trying to figure out what the go-to-market motion is, what the messaging is, what the positioning is going to be. Right? It's not fair to them to try to send them out into the market when we're still figuring all of that out. So we cut that back, and we only had me and one other seller for the first year, right? The seller for 6 months before we decided to grow the team. So
Yeah. I think this is really huge. I hope it inspires some founders and revenue leaders out there. Whoever your ICP is, there is a digital community out there. I promise you where they live, and go start spending, could be 6 months. Give it a 6-month test run, show up, no sales. And, it does feel like it's going to be a huge part of the future of go to market. And if you happen to be selling into the one buyer that doesn't have a community, well, what a golden opportunity for your company to go and build that community, with this sub brand.
Don't just do it digitally though, right?
Yeah.
Now, especially in 23, 24, going into 25, you can't just do it digitally. It has to be a mixture of the in-person and the digital world. So how do you make sure you bring that digital footprint together and also helping bring people together in real life, right? Customers, prospects, people that have a desire to learn from one another.
I love all of that. You're speaking my language with community, but I do want to switch gears a little bit to the acquisition itself. You did manage to sell this company, which is huge, and congratulations. I think a lot of folks are curious about what that process looks like. Everything from how did you identify them? Did they identify you? What was that courting process looking like? Would love it if you could share some details there.
Sure. So from the very beginning, Seamus and I had a plan. We wanted to exit within 5 years. We did it in 3.5 from when I joined. So pretty awesome. What did that look like? Take a step back. So like with the community-led motion, it allowed us to get a larger and larger set of concentric circles of influence, right? So we started off with the operators at Pavilion. Those people moved to other roles. We started doing work at companies, A and B. Then it went to C and D and then E. And what that created was a word of mouth around us and our capability, not just at the operator level, but now at the operating partner and go-to-market partner level within the private equity and VC firms that were investing there. And those folks were taking notice and they were starting to bring us into deals. And of course, those people spend a lot of time talking with investment bankers. And as it happens, there were several introductions that were made along the way. And we were open to conversations. And we'd had inquiries pretty much since the end of 21 about us as a business because of the growth, because of the market that we were in and the synergies that we would be able to bring to a company like the one that acquired us, SBI.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How's it been on the other side of an acquisition now?
The synergies were really, really good. And from a go-to-market perspective, we focus on companies that are 100 million to billion plus PE backed.
Wow.
And we're still working with the traditional Carabiner customers that we always have. But that's been a really interesting space for us. We just finished our first full quarter together, and that went swimmingly. I don't think it's very often that you see M&A and people hitting target and getting beyond target this early on, but we have, and it's been wonderful. So I can't say a bad thing about it in that regard. And there's always bumps and bruises as you bring teams together, cultures together, technology together. But we're making a good run of it so far.
Yeah. Glad to hear that. And man, it must be fun to dive into RevOps challenges at like the billion-dollar, company level. Things get pretty interesting and soupy once you're that big of an organization. So I imagine they're fun problems to wrestle with. So you have this crazy 3.5 year run. You think it's going to take 5, goes even better than planned. Acquisition happens. Basically, all goes according to plan, which is incredible.
Definitely some bumps and bruises along the way.
Yeah. I guess looking back, what would you do differently?
Definitely wouldn't have over-indexed on W-2s the way that we did. Would have given us a little bit more leeway there. And I wouldn't have tried to build my company. I'm friends with a lot of people in SaaS. I wouldn't have tried to build my company like a SaaS company as much. I think we got a little too pulled into the hype. And I think I tried to build a sales team too big. People, some of them were hitting, some of them weren't. But I think in our type of business, you don't necessarily need that level of manpower when you can do so much from a consumer-sided model, right? When it comes to the community, the word of mouth, the referral piece.
Yeah. And I think I know the answer to this, but did you bootstrap the whole way? Did you raise any outside money at all?
We bootstrapped the whole thing.
Wow. And then kind of that question flipped on its head. Obviously, you did a lot, right? We talked about that, but could you sum up some of maybe your personal or career learnings? There's probably a lot of folks that have aspirations to, build, incept, and sell a company, within 3.5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy run. For me personally, I grew and learned a ton. I'd never had a VP title before this. I'd never had a C-suite title before this. I never owned marketing before this. I had dotted lines into implementation and CS, but never fully owned those either. So this was a lot of new, but I had the opportunity to grow and learn as I went. And I had a boss and business partner that was willing to give me the rope I needed to go and be successful. And yeah, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of crazy hours, but yeah, I feel like the payoff is there, right? I'm only going to be this age once. My kids are small enough and have been small enough for the last few years that I don't think is a huge detriment now. And I want to spend more time with them later, right? So there's trade-offs that you make across all the different things that you're prioritizing in order to get there. Now, I was having this conversation with Sam at Inbound. Just said CRO school was incredible, and not just the course was good, but the relationships that came out of that and the mentorship I was able to get out of that with folks that have sold multiple companies before, people that were in their late 40s, 50s, 60s. That I've been walking with this group now. CRO school ended a few years back. We still get together every 2 weeks and talk, right? That's been invaluable to my growth. And then on the marketing side, again, I never owned marketing before this. So that first year in Pavilion, I would reach out to as many marketers as I could. And I talked to 2 marketers a week, VP of marketing or CMO, to find out what they were doing to be successful. So I could cobble together my own playbook and take all these best practices and sort of not shoehorn it into what we were trying to do, but make it work for where we were given the limited budget. And we somehow ended up on your podcast, which is awesome. But we get probably 2 or 3 podcasts a month, 2 or 3 webinars a month to come on. But we don't produce any of our own because we never had the budget for it before. So,
man, it's a very cool story, and kudos to all the hard work that went into it. And got to shout out Pavilion CRO School. Any of our revenue leaders or aspiring CROs, I would definitely go check that out. The way you describe it is almost how kind of folks that do their MBA talk about it. They're like, yeah, the learning was cool, it was great, but the network that I got from it was worth the cost of admission.
and I feel like I got an MBA over the last 4 years.
Yeah,
I don't think going and getting an actual MBA would have taught me what it takes to go through a deal cycle, what it's like to negotiate there, what it's like to put together a deal room, the highs and lows of running a bootstrap business when, customers that owe you $250,000 don't pay and you still have to make payroll. Like, there's all kinds of fun challenges that pop up there.
Totally, totally. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see the future of the MBA in 5 years. It's gonna have to either dramatically go through a massive evolution, or I don't know, and not taking away anyone who's done an MBA, because it's obviously incredibly hard and incredible if you can do it. But I think education is coming from a lot of different areas now, and I think community is a big driving factor. And speaking of community, we always have founder questions on this podcast. I think I missed them the last 2 episodes, so I apologize to the listeners. But you can always send questions to questions@gtmfund.com. The question here, it's right up your alley. That's why I picked it. Question is, how early do I start thinking about RevOps? And then there's a second question. They put 2 questions in one. When should I bring in a full-time headcount?
All right, 2 for 1. You got it. When do you start thinking about RevOps? Right away. 100% from the very beginning. RevOps is not just the technology, right? It is your customer's buying journey and how you do all of your strategy and process too. So think about it from the beginning. Be mindful of what that means and the downstream implications of the choices that you're making. I see a lot of folks try to go too wide of an aperture too quickly. They get that one flagship customer that's an enterprise that they have a relationship with. That's not really your ICP. Not your typical persona, because you don't have that level of access at other places. Focus on the things that are working, right? Not just the one outlier. You wanted to ask about when to hire. Full-time hire is tough. If you can find the right person that's willing to do a bunch of jobs, great. I think they're really hard to find in this particular environment, and they're not cheap. Director of RevOps right now is getting like 180 to 200 base plus a variable piece plus equity plus health benefits, right? You're probably looking at like 235 fully burdened rate. That's not easy to afford early. What you're probably going to end up with is senior manager or manager level, probably in the 135 to 165 range. And I probably don't get that person full time until I've hit, I don't know, $1 million plus, 2 million. And then only if you've got good underpinnings, you feel like you actually have product market fit. I think it's a really difficult hire to make, because most founders are going to look at it as something that is a loss leader or a cost center, as opposed to something that can actually help you accelerate revenue. And it's hard to do that early days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great answer, and just like everything, it's highly nuanced. Depends on your go-to-market motion. How complex it is. Your buyer, how complex your product is. There's a lot to think about there, but I think those are good kind of benchmarks around, like, if you're feeling like you have product market fit, you have 1 to 2 million ARR, and like, I want to say it almost should feel like the wheels are starting to fall off if you don't have this person. Like, you should feel a pull to get someone in,
Yeah. Can you find that person to help you put the guardrails on so that you don't go careening off the side of the mountain because you're going so fast?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But again, like, I think if you just are mindful and intentional about the way you set up your systems and you start doing documentation from the beginning, you can help offset a lot of that with a really good 1099. And that'll probably cost you half, right? You don't need a full-time person at those early days, but you need something.
Yeah. Great advice. All right. This brings us to my favorite 2 questions, and I always keep them the same, and they are intentionally vague, so you can highlight something we talked about or bring up something totally different. But The first question is, what is one go-to-market tactic or strategy that most revenue leaders believe to be true that you think is bullshit or no longer serving us?
Something that's bullshit that's no longer serving us. Optimizing for Google, optimizing for search, I don't think it's necessary anymore.
Interesting. Go deeper on that.
So, I mean, when's the last time you Googled something?
Probably pretty recently, but I do use ChatGPT a lot more. I think it's almost, I'm Googling things just because it is habit on my phone. I haven't fully got used to the app on my phone, even though I
That's
do
fair.
have it, but it's just like kind of my second nature to quickly Google something.
100%. And the last time you Googled something, when's the last time you actually clicked on a link versus reading the AI description that Google gave you at the very top?
Almost never click on a link. Yeah, almost never.
I think optimizing for Google and SEO is a waste of money. We are all stewards of capital. I don't see it being worthwhile.
I like it. I like it. So your Google search is dead. Where would you put those dollars?
I mean, you're talking to me, man. Community and events. We do a dinner a month. We're doubling down next year. We're going to do at least 2.
Yeah.
We're doubling down on in-person every quarter. I think it's so important. Bring people together, help solve each other's problems. And then if business comes out of it, great. If not, like, you have to think about this as a long tail exercise, right? It's not about winning just today. It's about winning quarter after quarter and year after year.
I love it. So a good take and one I agree with. And we've also talked on this pod about the idea of, what does like AI SEO look like in the future? Will be a very interesting conversation to see how that all
The
plays
same for everybody because it's all be written by the same computers. I don't know.
out.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not an
I wonder
SEO
if we
expert.
can.
but-
Yeah, I wonder if we can influence it at some point, or not. But it'll be someone will figure something out. All right. Everyone always loves to think there's a silver bullet, so I call this the silver bullet question. And we all know there isn't one. It has to be the sum of all the parts. But what's just one go-to-market tactic or strategy that's working for you? I'm not going to let you say showing up in communities because we hammered that part home. I'm not letting you off the hook that easy, but one tactic or strategy that's working for you or any of the companies that you're actively working with right now.
Other than having a good data set because your RevOps is in order, I would actually say taking a look at all the buying signals as they exist today. What I think is very curious and interesting for us to get to as an industry is, in the consumer world, we have all this data around Google, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, but we don't have that same data set for the dark social places where people spend a lot of their time. I think that's going to be the next big unlock, is getting a hold of that data. But the gatekeepers of that data are, being able to access it in Slack or being able to get into a very private API within LinkedIn, which we'll see if that ever happens. Or LinkedIn's got to go build a product. I don't know. Get off their butts and stop resting on their laurels. But I think taking all of that together and looking at, I don't want to say like a full-on customer 360 view because you can't see all of it, but being able to look at that and being able to put together all the different pieces of data, whether it's from like G2, Sales Intel, Bombora, Demand Base, 6sense, Caliber Mind, all these places where this buying signal data lives, and alongside the first party stuff, I think that's the key to being able to reach that 5% of folks who are buying now and the 25% of folks who are going to be buying in the near future.
Mm-hmm. We are very, very much aligned here. Thank you for jumping on, and congrats again on just the insane ride you've been on, and I'm sure it will continue. Lucky to have you involved in our community, and thanks for doing what you do and showing up and sharing your story. Anything you want to quickly shout out? Are you making any hires? Going to be speaking at any other events?
I will be attending a bunch of events. I don't know if I have anything scheduled for speaking the rest of the year. We just hired our first solutions engineer. He started 8 days ago. So that's been awesome. We'll probably make 3 or 4 more of those over the next probably 6 months, depending on how things roll out with Q4. But Q4 is off to a really good start. I think we're already north of 30% to the number. So it's been good. So
I love it. That's a good place to be. Good place to be right now. Awesome, man. Well, appreciate you again. And to our listeners, I say it every week. Listening's one thing, executing something totally different. I hope you take some of these learnings and apply them to your own business, and go follow this man on LinkedIn for sure. And we'll see you all next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.